So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a great big welcome to Jonathan Arnott.
Well, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I've been in the European Parliament now for just over a year, and I have to tell you that the enthusiasm of the new crop of MEPs, well, what we lack in experience, we certainly make up for in enthusiasm. I see my job out there as being to work to hold the European Union, the European Commission, to account, pointing out when they are breaking their own rules and working together with my colleagues to provide what is much needed opposition in that place. Almost as soon as I was elected, my name was chosen at random to scrutinise the election of the new Commission President. And so for the very first time in the chamber, I had to stand up and consent to scrutinising that election. So I stood up and I told them straight I would not take part in an undemocratic sham where we had the choice of one candidate to be voted for by secret ballot so that we didn't know how our MEPs have voted. Our constituents didn't know how our MEPs had voted. I voted against. We often vote hundreds of times in a single voting session, sometimes by show of hands, sometimes by electronic ballot. There's a red button that we press when we want to vote no to something. There's a grey button that we press when we want to abstain on something. And there's a green button. I've been asking my colleagues time and time again, and none of them can tell me what on earth the green button is for. But seriously, one of the things that I do is I make points of order. In one vote, they actually disabled the red button. They gave us the choice of voting yes or abstaining, but no opportunity whatsoever to vote no. So I stood up on a point of order and pointed out to President Schulz that the Parliament's rules of procedure don't allow him to do that. Of course, he waved it away, did it anyway, and that's how it works out there. They ignored the rules as well when I tried to cancel the rest of the day's proceedings as a protest against the undemocratic way they dealt with the TTIP issue. The rules required them to call an immediate vote, and they stalled and delayed for almost an hour to allow the Europhiles to pack the chamber against us. Now let's get rid of this nonsense media stereotype that UKIP MEPs don't do any work. I know I've spoken more times than any other British MEP of any party in the Parliament since being elected. My voting record out there is 98%. I'm second in the UK for asking parliamentary questions on behalf of my constituents. But best of all, Martin Schulz really hates me. This week in the Budget Committee, we're voting on amendments to the EU budget for this year. I've submitted 142 amendments designed to save taxpayers' money from the European Union. Every one aimed at cutting waste and unnecessary projects out there. Conference, how many of those 142 amendments do you think they're going to allow to go through? But you know, there's really an embarrassment of riches for talking about EU waste. You might have seen the story recently. Over £500,000 of taxpayers' money spent telling university students that when they're cold, they should put a jumper on. In the Budgetary Control Committee, on a more serious note, they were discussing immigration schemes not so long ago. They commissioned a study to work out how EU money, or as I prefer to call it, British taxpayers' money, was being spent on immigration controls. They wanted EU funds for migration to be spent on innovative schemes, which actually is a nonsense in itself when you're dealing with essential national security. You want to do the job properly, you don't want to be trying to innovate. But they found, when they did so, that the money wasn't going where it was supposed to go. It wasn't being spent in accordance with the rules. They found a case of fraud, and they found that most of the time, money was being mainstreamed back into the member states' budgets. So I spoke up in the committee. I pointed out just how absurd this situation is, that we send money to the EU, they send it back to be used for exactly the same purpose it was going to be used for in the first place, with all the administration, studies, discussions, mismanagement and fraud that we have to pay for. They just don't understand that some things are done better by countries themselves. But to me, the classic example of EU nonsense is the what-if machine. Over £1 million of taxpayers' money spent on training computers to ask the question, what if? My taxes, your taxes, spent building a machine able to invent and evaluate fictional ideas. And it's all online. So I went online last night and I asked it to come up with a what if about an animal that finds something. And this is the result of your taxes. It came up with this suggestion. What if there was an old snake who found a sword that he could use instead of a rock for smashing scissors? Seriously, guys, do we think that we're getting £1.24 million worth of value from our taxes? But if you think that what if was surreal, just wait till you hear the rest. What if the Labour Party were to choose a completely unelectable leader who wouldn't sing the national anthem, who wants to open our borders, who appointed a shadow farming minister who wants to make eating meat as unacceptable as smoking tobacco? Ladies and gentlemen, the stakes are too high. We must keep Labour out. A leader who gives senior roles to one person who supported terrorism and another who's a convicted arsonist. Could you imagine if UKIP had even appointed one person like that, what the media would be saying? Personally, I thought the what if about the snake was the more believable one. When Foot was Labour leader, Labour did so badly that Newcastle Central voted for Margaret Thatcher's Conservatives. Corbyn's even worse than Foot. Those who don't learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. But this time, the North East isn't going to vote Tory. It's places like Hartlepool where the Conservatives won't make the mistake of splitting the UKIP vote again. What if the European Union were to change the definition of a refugee and invite hundreds of thousands of people to take dangerous journeys, risking their lives travelling from one safe country to another? What if it were to announce that for every refugee that goes through Greece or Italy, it'll hand them €500 of taxpayers' money? What if it were to say that for every country that takes in a refugee, it'll give €6,000 of taxpayers' money? We're actually using taxpayers' money to encourage people to risk their lives, whilst ignoring the millions of genuine refugees, the most vulnerable people, the elderly, the women, the children who are left behind in countries like Jordan, Lebanon and Turkey. But the European Union forgets that the world doesn't end at the border of Europe. What if the United Nations were to give Saudi Arabia the chair of human rights committees? But this is serious. a 17-year-old took part in protests against the Saudi Arabian government in 2012. And he's set to be beheaded and crucified within days. Conference, we in UKIP stand for justice and against the barbaric Saudi Arabian injustice system. Can you remember last year when the EU sent us a £1.7 billion bill because they'd recalculated how much of our money they want going back to the 1990s? They decided they wanted to include charity work, voluntary work, drug deals and prostitution in the calculations of our national income. And of course, voluntary work and illegal activities don't bring in a single penny piece to the Exchequer. But the EU wanted to tax us on it anyway. And David Cameron came back from Brussels promising he would fight it. Well, the what-if machine has struck again. What if, in the last couple of months, we learned that he'd paid it in full on the quiet and hoped no one would notice? But I've got some sad news. With the front pages of the newspapers that we've seen over the last few days about David Cameron, the what-if machine has exploded. It's broken. It just couldn't cope with all the porkies. The bottom line, though, ladies and gentlemen, on the EU budget is that we're better off outside than in. Even after every single bizarre example of EU spending, this money that we get back that doesn't do anything for us, even after that, we'll still give the EU £11.3 billion more than we get back. That's not my figure, that's an Office for Budget Responsibility figure. We need to win this referendum campaign. The lessons to learn from my experience are very, very simple. One-size-fits-all laws for 28 countries make us all uncompetitive. We're spending massive amounts of money on the EU and we get very, very little indeed back. The money we do get back is often wasted. If we weren't in this organisation, nobody would be paying to join it. But we're paying year in, year out. It's time to regain our prosperity, regain our sovereignty, and I can promise you, ladies and gentlemen, the UKIP MEPs, we will be the ultimate turkeys voting for Christmas. Thank you.